So my contribution today is a culmination of interests based on the research and applied work we do at the University of Utah, the International Ecotourism Society, and the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. It is also informed by my various responsibilities in the tourism sector as guide in the early days, manager, and owner within the adventure travel and ecotourism sectors. The purpose of this contribution is to provide examples of ecotourism and sustainable tourism cases affecting positive change. And these are viewed through the Millennium Development Goals. So each year, the world loses 30 million acres of tropical forests. Biodiversity, our amazing life on Earth, is being reduced to the lowest levels in human history. We already have lost 1/4 of all bird species, 24% of mammal species, and 11% of plant species. And 1/4 of the world's coral reefs are being destroyed on a daily basis. As natural capital and ecosystem services experience increased stress and become even less abundant in the future, we can only expect the value of nature to actually increase. And according to researchers who have written a great deal about resilience thinking, as we move deeper into the 21st century, we cannot afford to lose more of our resource base. As an example of our planet providing resources to support basic human needs, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations report that 842 million people, or one in 8 people in the world, were estimated suffering from chronic hunger, regularly not getting enough food to conduct an active life. We live in and are part of the ecosystem, and as such, our health, our well-being is tied very closely to our ability to sustain biodiversity and very vibrant ecosystems. As another example, if the current water consumption patterns continue, half of the world's population will live in water-stressed river basins by 2025. In daily life, regions and businesses are interlinked systems into a web of people and nature, driven and dominated by the manner in which they respond to and interact with each other. They are complex systems, continually adapting to change. The current ruling paradigm that we can optimize components of the system in isolation of the rest of the system is proving inadequate to deal with the growing dynamic complexity of daily life. Sustainable solutions to our growing resource problems need to look beyond the business as usual approach. When considering the health of the planet, why does the tourism system matter with respect to sustainability, global development, and the health and well-being of communities? Tourism, as you heard earlier, is a significant economic driver. It ranks 4th after fuels, chemicals, and automotive products in the global export industry. It has an industry value of over $1 trillion a year and accounts for nearly 30% of the world's exports of commercial services. An increasing number of destinations have opened up and have invested in tourism, turning tourism into a key driver of socioeconomic progress through export revenues, the creation of jobs and enterprises, and infrastructure development. Despite occasional setbacks, international tourist arrivals have shown virtually uninterrupted growth, and according to UNWTO's long-term forecast, international tourist arrivals worldwide will increase by just over 3% a year from 2010 to 2013 to reach a $1.8 billion industry. Due to the size and reach of the tourism sector on our planet, its enormous growth rates and risk of negative impacts, sustainable development and management of the tourism system becomes more and more important in order to achieve a balance between a healthy ecosystem, poverty reduction, quality of life, high satisfaction as tourists, as well as long-term business success. Certainly, the United Nations World Tourism Organization has recognized this, conveying that sustainable tourism is tourism that takes full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and its host communities. The commitment put forward by the Millennium Development Goals called for the international community to rally around an expanded vision of poverty reduction and pro-poor growth that situates human development at the center of social and economic progress. It also recognized the critical role biodiversity conservation plays in supporting these concepts, particularly the dependence of the poor on natural resources. Over the past couple of years, together with colleagues from all over the world, I had the opportunity to explore sustainable tourism's contribution to addressing some of the Millennium Development Goals. The following examples will highlight the future challenges and opportunities for ecotourism and sustainable tourism's contribution to supporting and meeting the goals focused on poverty reduction, empowerment for women, conservation, and of course, development of partnerships. Local economic effects of tourism are determined by the share of tourism spending in the local economy, as well as the amount of the resulting indirect economic activities. Our research has demonstrated that increasing the involvement of local communities, especially the poor, in the tourism value chain can contribute to the development of the local economy and to, ultimately, poverty reduction. The extent of direct benefits to communities and poverty reduction will largely depend on the percentage of tourism needs that are locally supplied, such as products, labor, tourism services, and increasingly green services in energy and water efficiency and waste management. There's also increasing evidence that more sustainable tourism in rural areas can lead to positive poverty-reducing effects. For example, the tourism sector and a vast number of jobs to workers with little or no formal training. It can provide opportunities for those facing social and societal disadvantages in a way often not offered by other industries. According to the ILO and many other, tourism's value chain and its significant connections to other sectors such as agriculture, construction, utilities, and transport can contribute to poverty reduction. With regard to the supply chain in tourism, one job in the core tourism industry indirectly generates 1.5 additional jobs in a related economy. So let's take a look at some case examples which briefly highlight direct contributions to addressing tourism's contribution to poverty alleviation. Over the past 15 to 16 years now, I've had the opportunity to work with a group called Rivers Fiji. Rivers Fiji began whitewater rafting and kayaking operations in 1998 to protect the river canyon. Rivers Fiji convinced the leaseholding logging company and Native Land and Trust Board, which are the government lease managing organization, to work with indigenous landowners on a lease typical for conservation only. In return for that lease, Rivers Fiji compensates landowners directly through lease payments, user fees, and direct employment and various employment opportunities. In 2000, the company established the Upper Navua Conservation Area, which is a 16-kilometer canyon which is now protected from commercial extractive use within the primary corridor. 200 meters from either side of the river are also protected. This is the first lease for conservation of its kind in Fiji and possibly all of the South Pacific. For trips on the Upper Navua, each of the 9 Montagali or landowning groups and 2 adjacent villages have the opportunity to have their community members working for Rivers Fiji as guides or managers. Guides have additional opportunities for obtaining employment through driving, warehouse management, equipment repair, reservations and office staff, and operations management overall. This unique conservation effort calls upon tourist dollars to support the protection of Fiji's 3rd largest freshwater drainage, and it's also home to unique species of fish, parrots, and iguanas. Fiji's only boa constrictor and the largest intact groves of sago palm, which are now threatened in the rest of the South Pacific. Since the formation of the Upper Navua Conservation Area, the river has been designated as Fiji's first and to date only wetland of international importance as part of the International Ramsar Convention. Some of the lessons learned with the Rivers Fiji project: first, that a relatively small ecotourism operation can have positive economic impacts on a rural region. Tourism has expanded employment through direct and indirect opportunities. Typical farm and logging communities have added economic diversity to the region. Communities have growth and diversification to a remote region typically cut off from the positive benefits of tourism. They have additional economic reasons to protect the cultural and natural resources, and they have increased opportunities for increased education and training. Ancillary health and well-being activities have also emerged, including the development of schools, health clinics, and improved technology for drinking water. To enhance conservation in the area's fragile ecosystems, environmental outreach programs were developed through a partnership with Rivers Fiji and Nature Fiji, a local NGO focused on protection and conservation of the country's natural environment. Together, they provide local communities with a series of environmental education river trips to experience firsthand the economic, environmental, and cultural importance of their own backyard. In an effort to inspire future decision makers, these programs are designed to motivate children and their families to think about sustainability and other conservation benefits for the future. The results have been inspiring and brought an increased understanding to communities in and around Fiji's first and only Ramsar site. So what I've got here next is to take a look at some of the comments that came out of one of the first education and community-based orientation programs. So take a listen.
The aim of that is to bring about a sense of pride in the children to know that their elders made a good decision to conserve this Upper Noble conservation area, and that they will inherit it in the future, and that they will be the ones who will be managing it in the future.
It sounds minute, but it carries a lot of weight when we think of it, because when we visit this site, we must not leave anything behind to create damages to this nice pristine environment. This is the first time I'm here, and I really want to say now is that we should promote more of this in Fiji, because it is creating employment for the resource owners, and at the same time increasing the capacity on why environment is important. And so it is a source of capacity building for policymakers and officials from government, non-governmental organizations and business community. That is a way in which we can utilize our environment in making income rather than damaging it.
For future generation, it's really good for us to protect this place here, because firstly, apart from the money that the tourists usually give it to the Rivers Fiji, part of the money goes back to the people in the village. For us, what we normally do for the money that the tourists they give it to the village, we put it in the bank, and when our kids they did well in school to go to high school or uni, we use this money. It's really important to work together with Rivers Fiji, because we protect this place here. We don't let mine companies or logging companies to come around here. They might destroy lots of this.
And I think we'll be passing down from generation from me to my family and to the next 4 generations. I think we'll just pass it down.
To enhance conservation of the area's fragile ecosystems, this partnership has been very unique. So let's take a look at another Millennium Development Goal, and that's promoting gender equality and empowerment for women. A number of our case studies demonstrated that tourism can promote gender equality and empowerment for women in tourism. On Chira Island in Costa Rica, a small group of women were credited as agents of change and gained empowerment and reduced poverty through a small-scale ecotourism project again. They have also linked their project with other community producers, resulting in greater community benefit and empowerment. The result of the tourism development, as cited by the women in charge of the project, include monthly revenue that provides their families with food, clothing, housing, and some recreational opportunities. Access to national health care system, providing health insurance for their families. They have financial means to actually get access to health care once again. Increased employment skills, including hospitality-related activities, communication skills, interpretation skills, and actually operating new pieces of equipment such as boats and tractors. From a women's empowerment perspective, they feel their tourism project has provided direct support to a women's craft group, influenced community behavior, including better management of coastal resources, protecting reefs, fisheries, and mangroves. Through visitors, a greater awareness of educational opportunities and increased desire to travel by community members, and enhanced community pride. One woman suggested that more than my personal growth, it is important to see this change in my community. It has been marvelous to feel self-empowered, to dream about things, because we now have this infrastructure after having nothing more than mud under our nails. We see that it is possible to dream of more. These are simply brief examples of the ability of tourism projects to cut across gender barriers and work effectively towards poverty alleviation. There are several Millennium Development Goals that address health-related issues, and just as the international conservation and development organizations have had to recognize the importance of addressing poverty concerns for the long-term conservation success, sustainable tourism must continue to look for creative strategies to support the economic, social, and environmental balance. When evaluating this relationship, this is an intricacy or a vast web of interrelationships, and this becomes even clearer through sustainable tourism. Sustainable tourism operations aspire to be more energy efficient, more climate sound, consume less water, minimize waste, conserve biodiversity, support cultural heritage and traditional values, support intercultural understanding and tolerance, generate local income, and integrate communities with a view to improving livelihoods and reducing poverty, which in turn contribute to the health and quality of lives of people. And while the world itself is finite, increasing numbers of people are going to populate the world and travel to and fro. And it's going to make it possible for the world's peoples to get to know one another and impact one another in ways we have yet to imagine. The prospect of an international community increasingly transmigrating and transmingling brings with it reason for optimism and pessimism. The optimism resides in the possibility that tourism, when practiced sustainably, can lead to greater cross-cultural understanding, peace, well-being, and prosperity. The pessimism resides in the possibility that tourism, when practiced unsustainably, can lead to cross-cultural misunderstanding, disease, and poverty. Nowhere is this dual-edged prospect more pronounced than in the context of human and environmental health. In the review of our case studies, we found that sustainable tourism has an important role to play in fostering health and well-being. What we found was that when we're sitting at a crossroads of employees, travelers, and government agencies, the tourism industry is ideally situated to mitigate the spread of massive disease, such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other major diseases. What we also found was that fulfilling this responsibility can take place in three ways: educating and protecting tourism workers, educating travelers, and collaborating with government agencies, ministries, and healthcare providers to create policies and practices which promote health. This crossroads is evident in tourism, and we have a responsibility towards it. The aim is to have multiple stakeholders involved to create and implement effective disease prevention measures. An ecological perspective provides a good vantage point from which government agencies can think about the relationships among health, education, economies, communities, and individuals. Governmental agencies should welcome partnerships between ministries of health, tourism, and education, as well as collaborations with businesses, NGOs, the private sector, and tourism operators. There are many examples out there, and one that I'd like to point out is what the Ministry of Tourism in Barbados recently did, working closely with the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association and the National HIV/AIDS Commission to draft a policy that reduces discrimination and stigma and promotes supportive services and education amongst all its tourism workers about the transmission and prevention of HIV/AIDS. As recognized by the Millennium Development Goals, human health is dependent on biodiversity and the natural functioning of a healthy ecosystem. Further, people depend on the planet for medicines that originate from diverse types of ecosystems. These ecosystems also help underscore and understand disease, support for the food web upon which people depend, and reduce the risk of contacting infectious diseases. As such, another Millennium Development Goal is in ensuring environmental sustainability, which is the centerpiece for sustaining health in all its manifestations. Threats to biodiversity and the consequences of its losses, including the obvious ecological consequences, as well as the impact on aesthetic, ethical, sociological, and economic aspects of our world, reveal the reality of dependence on a healthy planet. Tourism relies on its destination's natural and cultural resources that local communities also depend on for their livelihoods and quality of life. This is a critical issue in developing countries where communities are dependent on natural resources for food, firewood, construction, water, and handicrafts. In addition to the dependency on tourism on natural and cultural resources for life-sustaining elements, attractions, activities, etc., it is essential that these resources are not depleted by tourism activities. I think we all know the development of tourism is accompanied by significant challenges in the form of non-renewable energy, intensive transportation, excessive water consumption compared with residential use, and discharges of untreated water, generation of waste, damage to terrestrial and marine biodiversity, and threats to survival of local cultures, built heritage, and traditions. Our research demonstrated that ecotourism plays a significant role in conservation of natural areas in many parts of the world, and that the virtuous circle of ecotourism leads to a self-reinforcing activity of positive attitudes and visitation to natural area sites. The visitation provides support for conservation in several ways. Tourism spending that supports local economies, tourists donate time and money to conservation projects, and many lobby governments to support biodiversity conservation. While climate change has been addressed through some environmental and tourism certification schemes and in the accommodation sector, these issues have not been considered more broadly across sustainable tourism sectors. A strategy to address climate change in the tourism industry needs to consider a wide range of approaches such as technological and managerial measures and sustainable transport, and of course travelers' behavior. Partnerships and collaboration will be a key to the future of the tourism sector, driving a global response to climate change, which leads us to the final goal addressed today, and me wrapping up here. Partnerships, whether at a local, regional, or national or global level, have the capacity to assist in creating a more sustainable tourism industries that can assist in meeting serious issues such as climate change and other elements of the Millennium Development Goals. This includes ideas such as development of financial systems with a commitment to good governance, special needs of landlocked or small island developing countries, and cooperation with the private sector, including benefits of new technologies. And our case studies found that partnership opportunities exist through a number of mechanisms, such as direct community-based tourism development, stimulating small businesses for long-term partners, and buying from a community-based tourism organization or local tour operator. A good example of partnerships is a regional case study of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority, which reinforced the role of ecotourism and sustainable tourism in partnership, and they also emphasized engaging all stakeholders. While we certainly are not naive to believe that sustainable tourism is the panacea to all the challenges we face as a global society, we do believe it has potential to support health and well-being of residents, and biodiversity conservation efforts and cultural heritage preservation, while creating a mechanism for education, sustained economic development, equal opportunities for women, and human rights, ultimately working towards a greater good. And just to end in the words of Wendell Berry, he said, "This world, this creation belongs in a limited sense to us. We may rightfully require certain things of it, the things necessary to keep us fully alive as the kind of creature we are. But we also belong to it, and it makes certain that our rightful claims are upon us, that we leave it undiminished, not just to our children, but to all creatures who we live with in it and after us." Thank you very much.